Hey guys, it's Landon Blake from topclasssurveyor.org, and I wanted to do a short video that just helped you a little bit with math. We're not going to do any math in this video, but I'm going to just kind of give you some tips and tricks if you're like me. Not everybody's like me. In fact, most people aren't like me, but there's a few of you out there that are like me. One of the reasons math was really hard for me before I got into college was because I am backwards and I am messy. Okay, backwards and messy. Okay, so I'm backwards and messy. Okay, what do I mean by that? Well, I have a problem they call dyslexia. That's the technical term, which means I tend to flop things around in my head, and I do that a lot with numbers, and that is a very bad thing if you are trying to do math, because if you flip numbers around, you get the wrong answer. So, for example, if I'm supposed to write 35, a lot of times I will write 53 by accident. Okay, I don't do it on purpose. It's just my brain's a little messed up, and I flip numbers sometimes. Okay, so it's just a problem I've had to deal with. And also, when I was younger, I was very messy. So it was hard to read my handwriting, and I was sloppy. And so I had to learn to deal with these two problems. I had to learn to deal with being backwards, and I had to learn to deal with being messy, or I wouldn't be a very good surveyor. And so I want to share you a couple tips that I use, two things that I do that help me with being backwards and messy. So here's the first tip. Learn to not be messy when you do math. And you're like, that's not very helpful. Okay, so I'll give you some suggestions. So if you have to do a lot of longhand math, in other words, you're doing a bunch of calculations by hand, and you have this problem like me, I encourage you to use graph paper. And here's what I want you to do. When you're using your graph paper, get in the habit of writing one number in each cell of the graph pad. Okay, and so I'm going to give you an example. So I'm going to draw a graph pad here. Okay. And then I'm going to show you, I'm going to do a bad example without a graph pad, and then I'm going to show you why I think a graph pad is important. And so if you're a parent or a teacher and you're watching this video, you know you've got some kids that have dyslexia, make them do their math on graph pads. I think it'll help. Okay, so let's just look at example. I know that green pen's hard to see on the whiteboard in the video. So here's what happens if you don't use a graph pad and you're doing longhand math calcs. So let's just say I'm trying to do this math. Okay, so I'm trying to add these two really big numbers together. Okay, and here's what happens. I'm coming through here, and I'm adding these numbers. 7, 3, 5, 4, 10. Okay, I guarantee I got that wrong. Okay, and it's hard because I can't line the numbers up properly, right? Because I'm messy. There's some are close together. There's a gap. Some are big. Some's lower. Others are higher. Okay, so let's try that over here. Let's do the math again, but we're going to use our grid. Okay, so we're going to say 3, 5, 2, 1, 6, 5, 2, 1. I'm going to add a couple cells to my grid. Okay. And you're going to see your grid doesn't even have to be perfect. It doesn't even have to be drawn perfect. Okay, let me write my second number on there. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, 2. Now I'm going to add these, okay? So now I'm adding these two numbers. Okay, 3, 2, 6, 8, 4, 6, 10, 4. That's the right answer. You can see I didn't get the right answers because I got my numbers misaligned. So if you have a kid that's messy, make them work on a grid. Okay, and it's even more important when you're doing like long division and you're stacking rows of numbers, or when you're doing subtraction and you have to carry. Let me do a subtraction example because I think that's important. So when you're gonna do subtraction by hand and you've got a dyslexic kid, right? Use the grid, but leave yourself an extra row at the top. And that what you can do with that extra row is you can use that. You can use that for when you got to borrow. Okay. So let me try and come up with a problem here where we got to use the extra row. So I'm going to leave myself this row at the top. Okay, so I'm going to have two numbers. I'm going to say 4008, and I'm going to subtract from that 536. So we're going to have to carry here, right? Okay, so here's what you can do if you have a messy kid. Okay, so 8 minus 6, that we're okay there too. We don't need to borrow, right? Here I need to borrow. Okay, so what I like to do is I say, all right, I got to borrow. Okay, so I'm going to come over here. I can't borrow from here because it's a 0. So I'm going to borrow from here. So what I tell my students is cross this out. My students, like I have a bunch of students. Cross this out, put 3 on top. Okay, then come over here and cross this out. So that becomes, this is now going to become a 10. Let's see. This is now going to become a 10, right? Okay, and now I've got a 10 over here I can borrow from. So I'm going to cross this out again. I'm going to put 9. Okay, and now this becomes 10. I'm going to cross this out. And then you got to use the numbers at the top now. Now do your subtraction. 10 minus 3 is 7. 9 minus 5 is 4. And we carry down to 3. 3, 4, 7, 2. So leave yourself that blank row on the top of your grid for when you have to borrow. Okay? And have them practice this on the grid. So that'll help with messy kids. The other problem that messy kids have is you might have to help them rewrite how they make numbers. So, for example, because I'm a surveyor, I write my 1s like this, so I don't get them confused with my 7s. So my 1s always have the crossbar on the bottom, okay, and this little thing here, okay. I like to write my 7s like that, okay. I like, my 5s like this. I write my 9s like this and my 6s like this. I don't do this, okay. So have your kids practice writing your numbers so they can tell them apart. I don't do any loop-de-loos in my 2s. Okay, my 2s look like that. I do closed 4s. I don't do open-ended 4s. Okay, so have your kids practice good number writing, good number penmanship. That'll help too. Okay, what do you do about dyslexia? I don't have a super great rule there, but I'll tell you what I try and do. The best thing you can do when you're backwards, when you have dyslexia like me, is you got to run your calcs twice. That's what you have to do. So math takes you twice as long. Okay, so let's look at an example. 6 times 2, 37. So 6 times 7 is 42. 6 times 3 is 18. Plus 4 is 22. 6 times 2 is 12. Plus 2 is 14. Now I had to carry a bunch of numbers in my brain to do that. And that's hard because I've got dyslexia. So I do that math again. And make sure I didn't mess it up. 6 times 7 is 42. 6 times 3 is 18 plus 4 is 22. 6 times 2 is 12 plus 2 is 14. Run that calc twice. Okay, and dyslexic people also have a hard time carrying multiple numbers in their head. If you're not dyslexic and you got a good memory, you can store 8 4-digit numbers in your head at one time. Dyslexic people have a hard time with that. So don't do that. So let's work this problem one more time. Now I've gotten better at it because I practice, and I use math all the time. But let's just say you're trying to teach a dyslexic student. Okay, don't let them carry the math in their head. So here's what you do. You tell them, come over here on your graph paper, and I want you to write this out. So that they don't have to carry the calcs in their head. 6 times 7, 42. Okay? 6 times 3 is 18. Okay? And they know they got to bring down the 4. 18 plus 4. Okay? That's 22. See, I'm not practicing good penmanship here. Should have put this over here so I have room. Okay? That's 22. Okay? 6 times 2 is 12, but we know we got to bring down the 2, so plus 2, okay, is 14. Okay? Then you can go in and teach them to move their numbers over. Right? 2, 2, 14. Make them write this out. I did it in my head, but they might need to write it out. And you come up with little systems like this that they can use, right? Because if they try and keep 42, and then they got to remember to pull down the 4, and then they got to put 22 in the register, and they got to remember to, or 18 in the register, and they got to remember to add the 4, but now they got 22, they got to move the 2 down, remember to, yeah. Dyslexic kids will mess that up. So have them write out the individual steps. This is why we shouldn't teach people in today's modern society to do a bunch of small math calculations by hand. Because if you're dyslexic, you're going to be prone to error, and computers do a way better job of that anyways. That's why we should use computers or calculators, or even an abacus or whatever it's called would be better than this. But if you have to do this, kids have to do this to get through school. Dyslexic kids, backwards kids like me, they need more room to write. They have to be neat. They got to run calcs twice. You know, and they can't carry a bunch of numbers up here in the registers in their brain, in the buckets in their brain. They got to write stuff down. Okay? So I hope those are a couple tips that'll help you guys. It's some math help for people that are backwards and messy like me. Use graph paper. Double check your numbers. Run your calcs twice. Write everything down. Don't try and hold numbers in your head as you're doing calculations. And remember, you know, when you get into the real world, when you decide to become a land surveyor, because I've inspired you with these great videos, don't stress about this. We use computers for math. You need to understand the concepts, but as your boss, I'm not going to ask you to do 50,000 calculations by hand on a piece of paper. But work at getting better, because you have to do it in school. You have to. There's no way around it. All right. So I'll try and do some more videos with just kind of some general tips to help with math, because I've struggled with math. You know, it's not easy for me. And if you're a teacher or other kind of education professional out there, and you have other suggestions that can help kids that are messy or have dyslexia with math, please send me your suggestions. I would love to hear those, and I'll read them and research them a little bit. And if it makes sense, I'll include them in some of my videos. Thanks for watching. TaughtBySurveyor.org.